Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to be talking about how I composed 200 plus pieces of music roughly for a recent video game I released called The Last Medic. So yeah, if you want to check that out, it's a 2D precision platformer. It's available on Steam. I'll put a link in the description, and it obviously helps support me and my channel. It's a 2D pixel art platformer where you play as this medic with a spacesuit, so you have a jetpack. So I'll just briefly kind of go over it. You can double jump, jetpack, dash, etc. Early on, I decided I wanted every level to have a unique piece of music because I realized when I was playtesting in the early stages, I didn't want to get bored of listening to the same song over and over again. And so one of the biggest challenges for this project was just coming up with ideas for music. And one thing that clicked early on is that because the game is divided in different planets, so you kind of hop from planet to planet, and each planet has a set of roughly like 10 levels, let's say, and each planet has a specific visual theme. And so I decided to treat each planet almost like an album and played by a different band. It set the constraint of what instruments I would be using and what genre. And that was kind of liberating, ironically. Like, I find that setting, the more constraints you set, the more you're free to explore within those constraints. So in the early prototype stages, I thought I was going to use more hardware synths. So I started prototyping stuff on the Dave Smith Pro 2. But for the most part, I ended up giving up on hardware synths because I realized early on that I'm much more productive when it comes to software synths. And also, I find that it's much easier to recall things. It's just much more integrated. In terms of the process of having to write lots and lots of music and being able to tweak parameters in the song and then re-export it, try it in the game. Just that whole loop, to me at least, was so much more fluid working with software synths. The Yuhi plugins were very heavily used, like Repro 1 and 5, Diva, Hive, Zebra. I found that those were my like go-to bread and butter. And then I use a lot of native instrument stuff, like their pianos, their strings, their drums. And then in terms of effects, I love the Valhalla DSP stuff, so I use their room reverb and their delay. So I use Ableton Live as my DAW. I'm on Live 11 still. I loved using the Ableton Simpler plugin. I use that a lot too because I could just record little kind of vocal things or just grab random audio clips, throw it in there, and then turn it into an instrument like almost immediately. In terms of hardware, I don't know if you can see behind me, I have a Blofeld. I'm just using that as my MIDI controller, so nothing fancy. So here's an example of one of the song projects. And as you can see, I have two tracks here, two return tracks. In this case, I have a vintage verb, and then I have a Valhalla delay. And then on my master, I basically created this makeshift mastering suite of plugins here. I have a mid-side EQ here, a glue compressor, just a normal EQ with a little bit of tweaking that I'll change depending on the song. And then I have a limiter just to kind of bring the levels up as necessary without clipping. But yeah, most of the tweaking is happening in the individual channels. I'll pop in EQ8. Most of the time I'm just applying a high pass filter, and then I'll throw in a little velocity curve from time to time depending on which plugin I'm using. Here I have like a Diva thing. I use this plugin I love a lot, Microtonic from Sonic Charge, which is a really cool little kind of electronic drum machine. I find I use that a lot. A lot of my process was either just like humming things in the shower or record things on my like iPhone recorder, voice recorder. But then a lot of ideas came just from sitting down and noodling on the keyboard. I found a lot of inspiration by trying new plugins. Sometimes I'll have the game running in the background and I'll kind of look at it and I'll try to envision the general mood for the specific level. But sometimes I would just write in isolation, like independent of the game. And sometimes the mechanics of the game would dictate the song a little bit. For example, there's some levels that have kind of rhythmic based things that you need to pay attention to in the game. In one of the planets, there's these walls that move and there's a very kind of strong sound and they move in rhythm. So for those specific levels, I made sure to compose things that are a little more ambient without a beat so that it didn't clash. All right, so this is the first planet and the first level, incidentally. And this actual song, if we listen to it, this riff I wrote on the Pro 2 initially. But then I ended up converting it to a repro plugin because of what I mentioned before of how it's much easier to recall things when they're in the plugin world. And we can go here and listen maybe to some other music. Alright, so here's the project for that first level. As you can see, it looks very similar to what I showed you before. I just have a repro one here, which is that main riff, so we can listen to that. Just a simple arpeggio, a little bit of EQ8 here. I have a tal bass line here, a microtonic for drums, and then some vocal sample here. Threw it in Ableton Simpler here, added some EQ. And then we have a CR78 drum kit here, which we can listen to. And we put all that together. All right, so here we're on Planet 2. So Planet 2 has more of like an indie band and like electric guitar, kind of like Elliott Smith inspired a little bit, obviously without vocals, maybe a little bit of like Radiohead inspiration. And incidentally, this planet introduces the first underwater level. So the underwater levels all share, I think, 4 different songs that I wrote, and they kind of alternate. I was very much inspired by like Donkey Kong Country's underwater levels, or just Mario underwater levels in general. There's always this kind of like, I feel like it's commonly known that underwater music is always nice in games, and so I wanted to sort of channel that spiritually. All right, we're on the 3rd planet now, and this planet introduces snow for the first time, and it also introduces low gravity. So the music is very kind of like, I don't know, chill indie with some drum and bass elements. So let's take a listen. I'll just wait for the drums to come in. And this is another level. Again, it has that like fairy tale, floaty kind of vibe, which I feel matches with this dark moonlight sort of ambience. And then obviously with the low gravity, I think it gels well. And here we have this wind in the background and this kind of rocky planet. And I'm starting to utilize more Ableton Simpler by using different kind of vocal samples. So let's take a listen. All right, so let's take a look at the Ableton project. Again, very similar layout, except in this case, I'm using Ableton Simpler quite a bit, and I'm using a bit of Repro 5 here too, with a bit of velocity adjustment depending on like how the keyboard interacts with the patch. And so yeah, if we isolate this part here, I can just play a note on my Blofeld. I think it's just me like saying random vocal singing, and then when you turn that into an actual instrument, it sounds like this. And then the repro is playing the same thing, but panned in the other direction. And it creates this more of like a bassy mood. And obviously when you combine the two, you get this kind of contrast where you get the right channel is like more bassy and synthy, the left channel is more high pitched and this like vocal sample. And so I think they complement each other well. And then we have another sample here, just a vocal sample into Ableton Simpler, which we can turn into an instrument. And that sounds like this. And again, on the other side, we have a Repro 1 playing the same thing, panned in the other direction. And when we combine those two, we get this. And then we put it all together with those two arpeggios and those two melody lines, we get this together. And then for the drums, I'm using a microtonic again. All right, let's move over to the fifth planet, Morius. Morius is kind of like an alien planet. For the music, I wanted to capture this essence of creating kind of like an alien planet, but that is not ominous. It's more this like weird, happy alien world. So there's a lot of these kind of like vocally lines contrasted with these interesting melodies and these kind of liquidy, like alien-esque texture sounds, if you will. It's hard to describe, but let's just listen to it. All right, so I opened another project from Planet 5. This is from another level, but I just wanted to show you some kind of automation stuff. So here I'm using two instances of Repro 1. So let's take a listen to the first one here in isolation. If we look at Repro 1, you can see there's some kind of looping automation here. And then you can see some parameters being tweaked here. So it creates this almost like modular type of sound. Sounds almost like Buchla-esque. I wanted those kind of bongo synthy stuff. And then let's see the second track here. This one is kind of more bassy. So if we put those two together, and then we have a CR78 and a microtonic. All right, let's move to planet 6, Elenas. And this is a green planet with lots of rain, and it introduces new mechanics like doors and teleporters and kind of these room-based challenge sections. So let's take a listen. This one is also very kind of soft, like vintagey synths mixed with these kind of chill drums. Let's take a look here. All right, so let's break down that project. Super simple. There's only 3 tracks here. The Repro 5 is providing the main sound. And then we get a kick from the microtonic. And then we just get a snare coming in here. Very, very simple stuff. Again, just some simple EQ on the different channels. And then my vanilla kind of mastering chain at the end. All right, let's move to planet 7, Noom. So this is kind of a more of a mechanical planet. It has these like metal structures. So for the first time, we're not on dirt or grass. And it creates this like weird mood because of these floating cubes. And then we're introducing these cannons that shoot you. So I wanted to create this kind of like mysterious, ominous sort of music. And if we look at that project here, I'm using the Yuhi Hive plugin. And then we have this other track which goes like this. More of a bass. And then the drums are just a dry 70s drum from Native Instruments. I had a bit of a velocity curve at the beginning just to not have the super loud kind of drum hits. I wanted more of a soft muted drum. I did a drum bus, a glue compressor, and a bit of an EQ, all kind of stock Ableton Suite plugins. And then, yeah, the drums sound like this. And then together with that synth line at the end. Again, here we have this kind of mysterious synth line. And this planet introduces the mechanic of low oxygen. And so if you step too far away from here, the oxygen depletes and then you die. This is planet Oromore, and here there's a lot of these kind of fluty synths mixed with very light, ghost note heavy drums. These more like fourth interval type of chords. And a bit of an out there sort of unusual melodies you'll find on this planet. Yeah, so for this planet, I'm mainly using Repro 1 and Repro 5, as well as the Native Instruments 70s drummer. All right, this is planet Coatseller. So in this one, I'm using lots of like 8-bit retro console inspired sounds. So they're not true like 8-bit. This is planet Ivius, and here again we have a bit of a 8-bitty sort of retro tone for the overworld music. Inside it's more these like warbly synths and these kind of like low groovy chill drums, if you will. So let's take a quick listen here while I play. Pretty sure this is the only planet where I use kind of like Rhodes electromechanical style sounds. Most of the game is synth based. Alright, this is planet 12. Here we introduce this like bouncy blue tile, as well as this interesting kind of playful vocally synth. Alright, so this is what that project looks like for that song. And again, I'm using Ableton Simpler, and I just loaded this giant audio file which has a bunch of like wind chimes. And maybe I can isolate some of those. And then for the other one, I found this female vocal sample. And I turned that into a patch. So if we listen to that wood chime one, it sounds like this. And the vocal one sounds like this. And I just panned those left and right, and together they sound like this. And then I'm using this Hive patch, which has really expressive feel in terms of dynamics and the mod wheel. So that's what it sounds like together. that like sound comes in when you move the mod wheel. So this is Planet 13 Finival. It has a lava theme to it, and I wanted to capture that general like lava smoke vibe to it. So a lot of it is just these ambient warbly lo-fi-y synths, as you can even see in the overworld music now. So it's this very eerie kind of atmospheric ambience and less kind of melodic synths. And then combined with the ambient sounds of kind of the lava and the fire, I think it captures the mood of this like dark, warm, desolate planet. And yeah, if we look at the project again, it just uses a sample. I think it was just a vocal that I sang. And I just drowned it in reverb and delay here from Valhalla. And it's basically just one track. There's nothing fancy. And I just kind of improvised some chords and melodies. And I think it created this really interesting vibe to it. All right, the next planet is Acidia. This is another snowy planet. It has low gravity and low oxygen. And this one I also wanted to create these kind of dreamy synths with a bit of drums as well, because I wanted to capture that floaty feeling of low gravity and the snow falling. I think it captures the dreaminess of the world, if you will. And then we can go to another level. Let's listen to the music here. Oh, this one is super cool because it comes in with this really fun like drum and bass thing. Gonna come in soon. Ah, so good. Was envisioning writing sort of like a contrapuntal Bach-ish kind of thing. And so I got out of the shower, like I took my iPhone, I recorded it, just like singing into it. But then I realized that like as I was recording, as I was singing, I was a little bit pitchy. I feel like I accidentally like changed keys a few times. But then I ended up keeping that. I decided to just take that. I imported that audio and I transcribed the melody exactly as I had sung it. And then I just went through and listened to it again, and I would add the corresponding harmony. I would try to write like a second line that would complement it. And this is the project for that. It's just using a Repro 5 as the synth. And so if we isolate the first one, it goes like this. I think this is the one that I sang in the shower. And then this is the one I wrote afterwards to complement it. And then if we listen to them together. And that's what I ended up using in the game. And then just for fun, I added this new classical soft nylon guitar. And that's what that same melody sounds like if it were to play on a classical guitar. Alright, so I'm gonna show you some planets, and now we're getting into kind of spoiler territory in the game. These are kind of secret planets that you unlock later. This one is interesting because, yeah, I really wanted to create a completely different vibe musically, so I'm not using any kind of synth plugins. I wanted to really capture the essence of what it's like to be in a black hole, which obviously there would be no music in a black hole. So it's obviously not like physically realistic of what it would be like, but I just wanted to capture that eerie mood of just being in darkness and this kind of weird trippy thing. So I'm using a lot of vocal samples, and I used random like bird calls and stuff like that. I added them into Ableton Simpler, and yeah, let's take a listen to the overworld. And I'm pretty sure here I'm just using like bird calls. And in this next level, I'm using a sample of a cello string, but I'm not using an actual cello library. I'm just using the one cello sample into Ableton Simpler. And this one again is different musically because it's all string quartets, and I'm using the native instruments. They had the Stradivari violin, and then they added later a cello, viola, and a violin. This one, yeah, this planet definitely took the longest to compose because I couldn't just like improvise. A lot of it I did by ear. I would generally have an idea of like an initial melody. I would just kind of noodle around with the plugin until I came up with something that sounded nice, and then I would just play it back and try to either hear a complementary like cello or viola line, or I would just kind of noodle around and play together. And here there's a visual representation of the little drummer. And this one has a very sort of industrial, mechanical vibe to it. Like lots of beats, but also beats using kind of samples of mechanical sound, like acoustic mechanical sounds. And here we're introducing the golden jetpack, which allows you to jetpack forever, well, until it runs out. And so here in one of the songs, I created a little drum kit using samples of like bottle popping and things like that. So the kit sounds like this. And then I created a little beat with that here. And so that created this atmosphere when you combine it with some Hive pads. Here's another project from that same planet, which has more of a mechanical feel. And here I'm using this patch from Hive, which sounds like this. And then another patch from Hive, which sounds like this. And then another patch from Hive, which sounds like this. And then here I created another drum kit using a bunch of like little props and kind of like, I don't know, glitchy, like mechanical noises of things. And I created a drum kit with, and then create a little beat which sounds like this. And then we put all that together, we get this. And then with the Hive pad. Then here I have a TR-505 and some microtonic drums. And so when we put it all together, we get this kind of groovy, industrial sort of kind of vibe. This is another project from that same planet. I just want to show you. So I found this audio which has like radio communication. I put that into drum rack and I sliced it up and created this little drum kit with so one of the parts sounds like this. Another part sounds like this. And then another part sounds like this. Then I have this synthy kind of line here. And this one has an auto pan and an arpeggiator associated to it, which creates that kind of vibe. And then we have a Repro 5 sort of synth line. And then when we put it all together, you get this. Then we add some beat with some Repro 1 bass. Alright, so now we're moving on to Arachnovos, which is the sort of last secret spoilery planet, which also is sort of like more of a alien spaceship rather than a planet. I wanted to capture that vibe as well, but I also wanted to keep the music here like fun and interesting. And here we're introducing the mechanic of these walls that you toggle by jumping on these little cubes. And so if you look at that project, here I'm using a diva for that main line. I'm using a 70s drum for the drums. And then there's some more diva and some more drums incorporated, so we get the final beat. Yeah, so I like to combine electronic and acoustic drums. So here we have the 70s drum. And then we have a microtonic. And we combine those two drums together. And here for the first time, I'm using the Zebra plugin. So I think I bought this plugin towards the end of the project because I've always heard good things about it and I've always wanted to try it as well. But also it served as this like inspiration for giving me more ideas, because at the tail end of the game, I was already becoming exhausted and a little bit burnt out. And so it was fun to just try a new synth and browse through presets and get inspiration that way. So yeah, as soon as I heard this patch, which was super expressive, let me see if I can open it so I can show you. Yeah, it's called Hornstar. I just loved it. Like, it immediately evoked this like melody out of me. And yeah, I'm just gonna play it back. Let's just listen to it. And then at the end, I added some diva, and we have this slightly different melody for the outro. And this is another song from that planet. I just want to show, because in this one I used 3 instances of Zebra, but they're all using kind of like percussive elements. So this is one of the tracks. This is another one. And this is another one. And I'm just doing a bit of pan automation, as you can see here. Sort of going from one side to the other, and then we bring it all those 3 together. And then we have some more zebras here. And then we put all together with a microtonic beat. All right, this is the final kind of planet, but I just want to show this project because this is a part of the project way, way, way at the end. And then this is like the last thing I composed probably. This is when I picked up the Spitfire Solstice Albion collection. There was a point where I was listening to like Bolivian music, like traditional music. And so I wanted to channel some of that vibe a little bit. But also just let myself be inspired by the instruments from this library. So I'm just gonna break down the track. This is a super long track because this final planet only has one level in it. Well, first let's like listen to it a little bit. So we have this guitar. And this like lead synth here, which is just a diva. And then at this point we have a choir that comes in to mimic that line. And then in the middle we have this little break where we have these two choir parts. So the first part goes like this. And then the other part goes like this. And I just pan them left and right. And then those two together sound like this. And then we enter the second section of the song. And it just keeps going like that. This is another section. And then in the outro, there's another choir section. So let's listen to that final choir part. All right, the final thing I want to show you is there's two sets of Easter eggs in the game. And for those Easter eggs, there's another set of music. So there are these 4 pianists that you can find. And for each one of those, I wrote a bit of like a piano piece, either inspired by Bach or Mozart. And then there's another suite of these 2 musicians that you'll come across called Caroline and Dustin. And they kind of live in a bubble, and it's a duo of guitar and bass, electric guitar and bass. And so I wrote, I forget how many of those there are, probably like 8 or 9. So I wrote these kind of little jingles with just bass and guitar. And okay, so here's one of the piano projects. I'm basically using Native Instruments Noir, which is my like favorite piano library so far. A little bit of a velocity curve because I want to make sure that the dynamic range is kind of on the softer side. A little bit of EQ and then some utility gain here. This is like fugue-ish a little bit. And this is another piece. So the previous one was more like Bach inspired. This one is more Mozart inspired. This was a kind of a fun palette cleanser for me, at least. This was towards the end of the project. I had written a lot of like synth stuff. And this was a fun thing because I yeah, obviously love playing piano. And so I just wanted to basically selfishly have an excuse to write this kind of music and just put it in the game. All right, a little bit of a spoiler warning. I'm just gonna show you how to discover like one of the secrets. I'll leave the other ones for you to explore, but just for the purpose of this video, just so you can hear the music from the guitarist and the bassist. So normally you would enter this thing as the exit of the level, but in this one in particular, you can kind of jump off the edge here. And then you discover Dustin and Caroline. So let's listen. So yeah, there's a few of those to find. I'll leave it up to you to discover those, and each one has a unique little jingle. I had a lot of fun writing those, and the piano one as well, even though they're super hidden and most people might not even hear those. I enjoy those kinds of things. Like I like putting effort in things that not a lot of people will see for some weird reason. Yeah, one interesting thing I found is that the more I progressed through making the game, the better I got at writing music and at making pixel art and stuff like that. And so I find that my best work is sort of at the end in the game, buried in like secret planets. Like some of my favorite planets, both in terms of mechanics, graphics, and music, are all the secret planets that most people won't even see, unfortunately. But that's sort of the nature of working on a big project, because I feel like if I'm working on something for 4 years, then naturally I'm growing as a creator. There's a whole other side of audio, which is the sound design. So I'm planning to do another video talking more about the sound design things. Like in this one, I focus mainly on the music. So if there's any interest in that, let me know in the comments. Definitely, if you're interested in this game from what you've seen, or if you like 2D platformers, check it out. I'll put a link in the description, and I'll leave a comment for the link to it's available on Steam right now, on Windows only for now. And if you play the game, I'd really appreciate if you left a review on Steam, because that helps me out too, for it to be kind of more featured on Steam and stuff like that. Yeah, so hopefully you like it. I poured my like heart and soul into this project for the last 4 years. I really make sure that the mechanics are fun. Like this isn't some quick like throwaway game that I made. Like I wanted to really make sure that it was fun. I'm planning to release the soundtrack for the game. I just need to figure out logistically how to divide it up. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.